Good. So the first question I'm going to address, and I've got some notes here, so I wanted to make sure that I have everything covered, as well as my own information, my own knowledge. I'm going to make sure that I've got covered extra knowledge as well and extra information for you. And the question is to really consider stress again and really look at the impact of stress on the physiology and psychology. But because we're doing anatomy and physiology and not psychology, we're going to look at how it impacts the body. And if you remember, we talked very much about fight or flight when we looked at the nervous system, and we looked at the autonomic nervous system in particular. We looked at the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. And if you remember, we looked at how the sympathetic system impacts the body, and the notion that when we were cavemen and hunting and gathering and looking after, our tribe, and we had to go out hunting, we would go out hunting and we'd have this mechanism that was able to be employed where we were rallied up into what would we call this sort of fight or flight, where certain physiological impacts on the body would occur, of which I will name some for you. And then we were able to, fight the woolly mammoth or go out and kill and then run for our lives and go home. We don't have to do that anymore, other than, various supermarkets perhaps where you have to hustle a little bit. But actually, it's not like that anymore. And actually, we still have that autonomic nervous system, but perhaps in this modern day, the way it plays out is within a stressful life. And our stresses that we encounter now with the digital lifestyle and the speed of the lifestyle and the requirements and the requests of everybody and how people want things so fast. And we're in a culture that really is like, if someone sends me an email, I feel compelled to answer it so quickly, when in fact, when we used to have a telephone or write a letter and send it in the post, I don't know how my parents used to do business without email and without, the instant. But, since, 1995, 96, 97 to 2000, and all through these 2000s now, is that we are in an age that is just so quick and so fast and so much information, and it's speeded up, and such that when our body is and our physiology is sped up, that we then are in a fight or flight or an autonomic nervous system mode. And if you remember from looking at the charts in the books that we've read and looked at, that first of all, we produce cortisol, our hormone, the endocrine system kicks in, and it's producing cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and this just revs us up. That's the initial preparation is adrenaline and cortisol. And these hormones in a short-term situation, like, do you remember we said, like, I might be going on a date. I've got to go and give a talk. I've got to have a meeting. I wonder what they want to talk about. Or you get butterflies, or you're in a situation that's just making you a little bit nervous. Then this is great, and this is what we want. It's a response that kicks us into a survival mode, and we want that. We want that sort of like, and it's very helpful to have that. If you're in a very stressful job, you might have that on a daily basis, so that you're under pressure. You've got to deal with things. You've got to actually sort of be on your game, and that runs the adrenaline and cortisol, and just that fight or flight, like a low level fight or flight the whole time. What we want, and then what happens, if you remember, we talked about the parasympathetic, that the parasympathetic employs the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve's job is to calm the body down. So when we realise we're not under threat, it's all right. You're going on your date or you're giving your talk and everything is actually all right, and nobody's sort of making you out to look stupid or or uncomfortable. Then actually we get a bit of dopamine hit and a bit of adrenaline for excitement, and actually we start feeling quite buzzy and quite and we're really happy, and it's a good thing. So that whole system, that whole physiology can be super beneficial. It prepares us. It's quite good to be a little bit nervous. It's good to have a bit of adrenaline. Then we feel okay, and the parasympathetic and the vagus nerve calms it down. Now that is short-term stress and is actually quite healthy and is actually really good. The chronic long-term stress, the conversation of chronic long-term stress, when we are producing adrenaline and cortisol, what happens in that situation is we get into a sort of immune response, and the immune response inhibits white blood cells. It produces inflammation within all the systems, and it reduces antibody production. And what we are then in is actually, it's almost like an autoimmune response where the body produces and causes inflammation. So all through this anatomy course, through every single system, I've been saying that every single system, when in its pathology or in its disease or in its imbalance, causes inflammation. And when you have inflammation internally, because sometimes we think of inflammation as just swelling, oh, this is a bit inflamed, or oh, this is a bit inflamed here or there, and you think of local external inflammation. But if you then look at and we've now covered all the systems, and we're looking at the internal organ inflammatory response, which is an immune response, but the body is now compromised in this immune inflammatory response. And when you have inflammation, it causes stagnation, and it causes blockage, and it causes disease and disharmony in the body. So this is a really important, and also when we are constantly in this mode, in this sympathetic fight or flight, even if it's to a degree quite low level, but we're constantly in it, what we are not allowing is the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic to reverse all those responses, all those heightened, fast responding inflammatory responses, is that actually the body won't calm down, and that in itself can cause chronic conditions. For example, if you go through each organ system, starting with the brain, it can cause depression, it can cause anxiety in the heart, it can cause inflammation of the respiratory system and the lungs, causing asthma. It causes inflammatory in the whole of the digestive alimentary tract, so that your stomach becomes inflamed, the lining. We shut down and stop producing enzymes. Rapid heart rate and blood flow, and that in itself, very high blood pressure in itself, is having the blood flow so fast through the arteries that it can cause like an atherosclerosis, high blood pressure, hardening of the arteries. They stop being soft and beautifully flowing with blood, but more sort of quite staccato and hard. So we don't want that. And then, the liver and the intestines, everywhere is getting inflamed. And then the reproductive system also can shut down and become a bit erratic. And then here as well, I've noted that like behavioural patterns, so when we are stressed and we're feeling frazzled, we tend to also crave sugars and alcohol to calm the nervous system. And you know, naughty food like, you know, sugars and fast foods to just pacify and calm us down. And we don't get an exercise because we're exhausted, and we don't get enough sleep because we're exhausted and our mind is racing with stress. So lack of sleep, poor nutrition, lack of hydration, compromised immune system, poor diet, stress, is this autoimmune response will then become chronic, and that is when we are more more likely to get chronic disorders and diseases and conditions. So that is the impact of stress there. I'm just going to have a look at my other note. Let me just have a look at this, because I think this covers it as well. So yeah, the other notes that I've got here is it can lead to cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure, weakened immune system, cortisol, I've said that. Yeah, and also if you think about the actual, like your muscles, they become quite stressed and quite tight, and you're like, you know, we get really tight in our bodies as well. Sleep deprivation, mental health. I mean, the whole mental wellness space is now full of our stresses and our worries and our anxieties and our catastrophizing and our angst. There's so many, and money worries, and am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Am I comparison on Instagram and various places? Am I good enough? I don't know if I'm, you know, and you know, what's it called, that I'll come to it in a minute, but you know, where you think you're not good enough, and it is called, I'll get to it in a minute.
Do you mean imposter syndrome?
Thank you so much. Imposter syndrome. Thank you so much.
Imposter
Imposter syndrome is just very stressful. You know, we're just like, is it okay? Am I doing okay? Is it okay? And skin. You know, the skin. From the inside out, we reflect, and we can have hormonal breakouts when we're very, very stressed. We can get, you know, breakouts not only on our face but on our body. We might suffer with eczema or psoriasis breakouts as a result of stress. Our hair can suffer, our nails can suffer. So you know, all of those external factors are impacted by the heat that is caused by chronic inflammation as well. And then also heat in the bowel causes constipation, or it can actually as well cause diarrhea. So irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, is a huge player of stress. And so the digestive system, do you remember we talked also about the bidirectional nervous system that goes to the brain and to the gut, that when we live a very stressful lifestyle, the two passageways can impact each other, in that you can get a weak microbiome and inflammatory gut disorders like leaky gut and IBS, and in turn, with poor diet choices, it can make us feel very lethargic, very tired, and indeed very miserable, and a bit low mood, a bit choppy. And until and also the lack of hydration causes that as well. So just to sort of say that if you do live a stressful lifestyle, which some of us choose to do so, some of us might like to have a bit of adrenaline, a bit of busy, but you have to take on board and be very proactive about your parasympathetic reversal, so that we are doing, and remember we said how all the 20 ways of toning and strengthening the vagus nerve that employs the calm and employs those nerves that will settle everything down and reverse the sympathetic nervous system. And they are Well, we won't talk about the cold showers, but we will talk about mindfulness and walking in nature and having fun with friends and massage and tai chi and acupuncture and all the complementary therapy and essential oils, good diet, walking barefoot, getting enough light, getting enough sleep, moving, dancing, gargling, humming, singing, laughing, all of that. Taking time to manage your stress will just do that. And also to identify what your stressor is. You know, if your stressor is social media, it may be that you limit the time and you have an alarm or a gauge on your clock, on your phone, sorry, that says, here's your hour or here's your half-hour check-in, and then it gets you off. So there are maybe strategies in where you can limit your time doing social media, or have a cull. Get rid of all the people that wig you out on social media, like literally get rid of them. Unfollow all the people that do your head in. It's really nice. And you know, limit your time who you follow. Follow people that nourish you. Surround your people that nourish you. Go and be with people that really lower your stress. Animals, dogs, cuddles with dogs. I think that's at the top of my list, actually. Out in nature, walking dogs, having cuddle with dogs. The best vagus nerve strengthening hack. Or cats if you're a cat person. So I hope that that's been pretty thorough. May I just check in and see if there's any questions around that?
No, thank you though.
Does that cover it? Does
Yeah,
that cover
really
it?
useful.
Excellent. Great. So that's recorded, and I've recorded it here as well. I'm just going to stop that.